Hi, David.
Hi, Easy. Nice to see you.
Good to see you too.
Happy,
Uh,
happy, happy Rye January.
Happy Rye January indeed. I found that term online somewhere and I was like, I love it. I'm not a big fan of the dry January because I try to keep my drinking at a
Moderation, not
steady,
abstention. I agree.
yeah, steady state, not getting crazy. But anyway, so I've been drinking a lot of rye whiskeys recently, and it's been having some fun with that. I thought it would be good to talk with you about what some of your favorite ryes are right now.
I think so. I think the first thing we should do is have a drink
Yes,
to
I
sure,
agree.
sure to loosen the old brain cells, as it were, or whatever
Hmm.
you call it. Lubrication.
Yes.
Lubrication for thought. Um,
Hmm.
so I've got here. We've got the same thing, haven't we? We've just
Yep.
opened it. It's the
Fresh Crag.
Rittenhouse Rye bottled in bond.
That's
I
right.
don't know. Is there any reference number as to what the batch would be on here? Do they have that sort of thing?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. What the season was, what the year was. I don't.
I've just got the barcode. I think that's all I've got, and then where it's been imported by.
Yeah. No, nothing on mine either about year. So,
No, well, it's bottled in bond,
yeah,
so it is a 50% ABV.
right. And aged for a minimum of 4 years. It's nice.
So this is probably a whiskey. A lot of people might have already tried this actually, which is why I think it's kind of an interesting thing to have,
Yeah.
and it is something that's readily available both in the UK and Europe and in the US because
Yeah.
the availability of our rye whiskey is limited in the
Hmm.
UK. So certainly, if you wanted to buy something from a supermarket or grocery store, you'd be quite limited. It kind of depends on where you are and what's kind of in fashion at the time. But Rittenhouse, you can get it on Amazon. You can get it in most specialty sort of booze shops. So you'd probably be all right with that. It's very well respected and it's a reasonable price. I think mine was about £40 for the
Okay.
bottle.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know what it's priced here in the US. I think it's in the
Yeah,
$20
less,
range.
I'm sure.
Less. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, so is that extra tax because it's 50%?
Yeah. Yeah. So, one of the interesting things about Rittenhouse is it was a Pennsylvania brand. And so it used to have a very different mash bill, but in the 80s, 70s, somewhere around there, the brand got sold to Heaven Hill. And then they changed the mash bill to the kind of standard Kentucky style, which is 51% rye and then a big portion of corn and a little bit of malted barley.
There's certainly a little bit of sweetness
Yeah.
on the palate, which I guess is the core. And there's also this mix of sort of black and white pepper on the nose, which is
Hmm.
something that I kind of get. And then moving towards a sort of more lingering kind of slightly raisiny, slightly chewy, fruity, spicy kind of woodiness, which I think is typically what I would expect from a lot of rye whiskies. At least
Yeah.
when I first started trying rye whiskies, that the first few I tried, that's what they tasted like.
Yeah.
And you can kind of see why it then works in a lot of the drinks that it works well in. Putting this with red
Hmm.
vermouth, it's obvious, right?
Right. Yeah. I like, for me, rye has always seemed to have a much broader flavor palette than, say, like bourbon. A lot of bourbons, even the ones now that are not coming from Kentucky, all kind of fall within a fairly standard range. But rye can be all over the place, which to me makes it really fun. Like this to me is not too dissimilar to like a high rye bourbon. So, like your old granddad.
Yeah.
Um, because there's some of that sweetness, but the rye is obviously more dominant. To me, there's this bit of the spice character that has this fruity element in it that reminds me of like the skin from a plum. It's like slightly,
Slightly tannic.
fruity. Yeah, but yeah, it's got this fruity element, but a tannic at the same time. And I like that part about rye. So, um,
Yeah, I think you make a really interesting point about that. Um, that sort of threshold between a high rye bourbon
hmm
and a rye whiskey. And like I think like the first one of the first ryes I tried was probably Wild Turkey, and I was
mm,
already familiar with the 101. And this was back when it was pretty much just 101. That's what you could get. So it's
yeah,
101 for the bourbon and 101 for the rye. And I remember being fans of the bourbon and tasting the rye and going, well, this is quite similar. Like I was surprised at how similar
right,
the two were. But then I think probably if you delve into what the mash bill is, actually the difference between the whiskies is not necessarily huge. And I think, yeah, it can often be, there's an interchangeability then between a high rye bourbon, which probably was then and still now is probably my sweet spot when it comes to American whiskey, and
yeah,
then the rise, and then when you move into some of these newer producers of rye, then
hmm
you really it's totally different. And I guess it's worth
yeah,
pointing out that anyone that's making rye whiskey, it's a mucky and messy business.
yeah,
Doing the fermentation of rye, particularly the higher the rye content, it's porridgey and yeah. So if you're doing it, you probably don't want to make it just taste like something else that you can buy for $20 a bottle because what's the point?
yeah. So that's one of the, I think, interesting things that you see with a lot of ryes from new distilleries is the flavor profiles again can be all over the place, but part of that is like you said, because rye is kind of challenging to work with. It gets really gelatinous and sticks together, and you got to fight that. It's very sensitive to temperature during the like mashing portion, but also during fermentation, and so you can get super fruity floral elements that remind you of bubble gum, and then you can get very grassy spicy elements, and so it runs this really big gamut you don't see in other whiskeys.
Yeah, and that's what they were trying to. I was trying to think. There's probably maybe half a dozen, maybe slightly less, producers of rye whiskey in the UK,
Mm,
and most of them, and maybe they've done it as a one-off, or maybe it's an ongoing product. But most of those have gone down that route. It's a higher mash bill of rye, so sort of 70 plus,
yeah.
um, and they are as a liquid. They to me, I feel like they're richer, but they're more intense. They're chewier. They seem thicker.
Mm,
Um, Sometimes you get almost like to some of those like darker notes that you might get from like that, very dense rye bread. There's like that German
yeah, yeah,
quite
like
dense rye bread.
pumpernickel.
Yeah, those sorts of flavors
Yeah,
come through, which is very different. And if you are expecting this, which is
right,
a hop, skip, and a jump from a high rye bourbon,
right,
then you're right with this is a different sort of rye whiskey and doesn't necessarily work the same when you're having drinks, or you have to modify how those flavor profiles work. And I think it's something that's fascinated me, and I've seen it kind of reflects what happened in gin when gin started to or gin producers started to innovate a little bit more about what was acceptable as a style and a flavor profile, um, and this ability to communicate what the flavor is. Because if you
right,
want one of these like really thick and hearty kind of high, really high um, rye whiskies, then that's one thing, and maybe more you're going to drink that on its own. But if you want something that's light and for cocktails, that's a different thing. And you need to be, as a consumer, be able to go, it's this or it's that, because otherwise
right.
you have this problem. And a lot of these rye whiskies, certainly in the UK, are 50, 60 quid a bottle.
hmm
So, you're talking at least twice the price of Jack Daniels. This is just for reference. I know it's not the
Yeah,
same
yeah.
thing. get it. But
Yeah.
just for reference, or as I said, the Rittenhouse was 40, so this is maybe another 50% on top of that, and they will probably be very limited. A lot of them are single barrels, so there's much more of a special release. But you kind of got to, be aware of that sort of thing. And I know that's true of whiskies in the US and also rye whiskies around the world, in my
Yeah.
experience.
So before I got into the drinks business, I was just exploring whiskeys. And in San Francisco, obviously one of the like leading craft distilleries in that early period was Anchor Distilling, what's now Hodling. And they put out a rye whiskey. So my friends and I were excited to try it. We bought a bottle. We chipped in because it was like $80, $90, something
Is
like
this
that.
old Potrero? Is that the one you're talking
Yeah,
about?
Old Potrero. It was like $80 or $90 a bottle, and this was like early 2000s, so it was an expensive bottle.
And with a lower tax.
Yeah, and with a low tax. And we tried it, and we're just like really confused. And what we learned later, what I now know, is that the old Potrero rye whiskey that they made, that they put out, is actually a rye malt. So 100% of the rye grain was malted. And the reason for that, which I didn't understand at the time, was that so Anchor was a brewery, right? They made beer. So they didn't have the same like cooking kettles that other like distillers use. So they needed a way to lauter their whiskey basically. And so they were like, well, we can use rye malt because you can make rye beer, right? And so I think that was part of it. It's just that, like it meant they had less equipment, specialty equipment they had to buy for the distillery. So they used rye malt. And then part of it was like Maytag, the old owner of Anchor, was really into like historical recreations of spirits, and so that was part of it. So it took me a really long time to kind of like deconstruct or really kind of understand rye malt. um
Yeah.
but but now I really enjoy them. But if you're a new consumer, that's a real uphill battle to kind of fight. If you're used to Rittenhouse or say Bullet, um and you, like you said, you go, you're like, oh, there's this craft distillery or independent distillery that I'm interested in supporting. I'll buy a bottle. And then you get it and you're just like, oh, what is this? So different. So one of the rye malt whiskeys that I have that I really love is this one from New York called Coppersea. Um, I don't know that they're actually in business anymore. Their website and social media seems to still be active, but like if you go looking online to buy bottles, like a lot of the sites, at least here in the US, have them sold out. So I'm not really sure. But this
So if
is
you
a
see
bottle
one,
that,
probably worth picking it up.
yeah, yeah, for sure. The malted rye, they call it, it's got some name that I can't pronounce. I think it's some geographic location in the Hudson Valley or something. I can't remember. Anyway, but I love their malted rye. It's got this really deep flavor to it. It's a little bit grassy. It's got this like dark molasses character to it. I just really love it. But, 24-year-old me would have been very confused.
Yeah, that's that's exactly right. And I guess this is also like part of the thing when, as we both do, and in various ways we do different spirits competitions. This is kind of part of the thing that different competitions have had to evolve
Right.
to make sure that all the judges understand that there
Yeah.
is this wider range of rye whiskies that probably had been made at some point, but kind of
Right.
the range narrowed, and
Right.
now it's opening up again, and
Right.
to appreciate these things. So when you're drinking your rye whiskey, how do you like to drink it when you're not
Oh,
being lazy and just drinking it on its own?
it's like anything else. I will drink it neat. I will drink it with water. If I want like a highball. or last night actually, I made a sort of Manhattan with rye. So I used rye whiskey, and I'm out of red vermouth, so I had this Bianco. So I was like, try
Oh,
that.
sweet, quite sweet. Why not?
Yeah, yeah. So it was fine. It was
Out of red
uh
vermouth. Honesty. What will the people listening think? There'll be a gas.
yeah. Yeah. So it was fine. I think well, the other thing too is the Bianco I had was this like it on its own it's very nice. It's vermouth from California, and it's kind of interesting because they use a particular variety of Artemisia. So it's not wormwood specific. It's a California variety of Artemisia that's in the wormwood family. So it's got a different character on its own. It makes a really nice aperitif. But as a like a vermouth for traditional
Mixer.
cocktails, it didn't quite work as well. So I think that was part of it. It was fine. It worked.
Probably
It got the
nice with
job done.
like sparkling water or something like that.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
just
yeah,
making
yeah.
myself a little in this little jug, a little old fashioned.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So I've put 2 little sachets of sugar in there that I pinched from some cafe or restaurant at some point. I put some bitters in. I went for the Bitter Truth Jerry Thomas bitters.
Oh yeah.
There we go. We're part way through a move, so my Angostura is at the other place. So
Yeah, I just ran out of Angostura. I need to buy more.
what?
It's so expensive here. It's
Is it true
crazy.
that there's a little trumpet when you finally run out? They can't believe that it's happened. Someone's run out of Angostura bitters.
Yeah. I mean that bottle has lasted us quite a while, but it does run out eventually.
It does.
But then like
I'm just
everything else, it's a standard bottle's 6 ounces, something like that.
stock up whilst you're over.
Yeah, and it's $13 for a bottle. It's crazy.
It's quite strong.
Yeah, I
Um,
know, but
how
still.
do you like your old fashions, Easy?
Yeah, I'm not a real old
I
fashioned
didn't
kind
think
of
I felt
guy.
like you weren't. It's not an old
No,
fashioned guy.
I'm more of a
Not in that sense,
Manhattan.
anyway.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm a more Manhattan guy. I like the sweeter
He likes
kind
the
of
dividends.
elements. Yeah, I like the dividends.
I've chilled
Uh,
my glass, pre-chilled.
hmm,
Put that right there. So that's my little mixing jug I've used.
mhm.
So here we go. You could use sugar syrup. I don't know. I just quite like using the actual sugar.
Oh,
I'm just going to
really?
leave a load of sugar at the end here. I've got this mush at the
Yeah.
bottom.
So
You could
that's
say it's
a
quite
that,
pointless and a waste, but
yeah. That's
okay.
one thing. I I don't like making old fashions partly because the sugar never dissolves fully, and I want the drink to be sweeter. So
Well, you just go the Wisconsin way and add some 7 Up to it afterwards.
Yeah,
Wisconsin
yeah.
old fashioned. It's a respectable cocktail. Why not? So, yeah, this is done. You probably would want this a bit sweeter. I should have stirred it for longer. But I like the method of uh, chilling the glass. I think this guy Chris, New Orleans bartender. That's where I learned it from.
Hmm.
Like chilling the glass, and then so this is actually quite a big glass to do it in. I'd use a smaller one normally, and then pour the drink straight into there, which is quite nice.
Yeah.
Very good drink on a plane, I find. One of the few free mixed cocktails that you will find
Okay.
occasionally on a plane. Although sometimes when I've had it, it just tastes like bourbon. So you do, you do wonder, but
Right.
there we go.
Yeah. In terms of sort of like the other than an old fashioned, like the other classics or rye cocktails, do you have a particular favorite?
Um, I do like a Manhattan,
Hmm.
and I think one of the best cocktails. I think one of the best I've ever had, and certainly one of the best I've ever made, was a it was a Manhattan, and it was with Noilly Red, which is very hard to get hold of in the UK now.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm trying to think what the whiskey was. It might have been Rittenhouse. It might have been 101 Wild Turkey, the rye whiskey. And I made a Manhattan with that, and I don't know. There was something about, was it the time or whatever the thing was, but occasionally you have a drink and you're just like, wow, just it all fits together. I can't recall if I put maraschino in it or not because it was a long time ago. We're talking about 15 years ago.
Mhm.
What I have found more recently is that if I add that little teaspoon of
Yeah.
maraschino liqueur to the drink, um, then I think I must have put it in there. I think that's part of the reason why I liked it. It's usually I didn't bother, so I just usually just did it like I would do a bit more like I would do a martini, and
Yeah.
just kind of not as maybe like 3 to 1, 3 parts whiskey, 1 part red vermouth, or maybe 2 to 1. But I wouldn't put in that little splash of maraschino, and I think that little splash of maraschino, that little bit of sweetness, can be a thing that just makes it all come together. I mean, when we're mixing at home and you're thinking about sugar in the diet and stuff like that, you do kind of go, oh well, maybe we'll put a little bit less sugar in, and then
Right. Right.
kind of like, well, there's plenty of booze, plenty of calories in it anyway. So actually,
Right.
that little teaspoon of sugar, if it makes it from here to here, I mean, okay, so you might drink more, but if you're just going to have 1 or 2 really good cocktails, then probably it's worth
Yeah.
that little indulgence, as it were.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, when I you want a rye cocktail, usually I just go for a Sazerac because I like that anise character. I
You love that anise, don't you?
yeah.
Anything? Oh well, gin and tonic, but with an absinthe rinse, please.
I haven't tried that. That sounds good.
So, if anyone's ever doing in a cocktail competition that Easy's judging, absinthe rinse
Yeah, absinthe rinse.
as a
That's the
winner.
key. Um, so that's usually because it's pretty simple. I really love well-made Vieux Carrés, but
And
sometimes I
remind
just
us what's
like
in that.
it. So it's cognac, rye, Benedictine, and sweet vermouth
Oof,
and bitters. Yeah. So
sounds lovely. And
it
again,
it
you're
was
getting
really
that. So I mean, that sounds a little bit like a split base Manhattan with the Benedictine instead of the maraschino.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
Yeah.
who you can't go wrong with a bit of Benny.
Yeah, no, Benedictine's really
We
tasty.
should try it with the fancy Benedictine, the one that's aged for longer.
Oh, I don't know that I've seen that. So I've seen there's the regular Benedictine and then there's the B&B, right, which is
Yep,
brandy and Benedictine.
yep.
I haven't
And
seen
then
another one.
there's like some other one that just came out for a limited time in um uh in travel retail. I can't remember what it's called. I have a feeling like it had a bit more Angelica in it, and it was a bit like B&B, but the ratios were different. So a bit like how Grand Marnier, depending on as you go up the levels, the ratio of the liqueur and the brandy
Right,
changes. I feel
right, right,
like
right.
this might have been like a better quality brandy and a higher portion brandied B&B, I think. Um, and then the other one is purely liqueur, but it's aged for a longer period of time. It's more select or whatever. Um,
Yeah.
but
Single
we can
cask
we can we can
oak
try those
age.
because I've got them here. So when you're over, we can
Oh, yeah.
have a take. There's a podcast for you.
Yeah.
So we're spending all our time here. It's for the podcast. We're working. It's for
Yeah.
the podcast.
That's the way I explain most of my drinking. It's for
Yeah,
work.
and I've got a vintage Benedictine as well that I've not opened yet. So there's the
Ooh.
time. Anyway,
Yeah. Yeah. Um any other rye whiskeys you got
yeah, let's try
recently?
this one. So this is so I find Germany's quite a popular place. I mean, I
Yeah.
think the rye flavor profile resonates with them sort of culturally. Not just, Austria and Switzerland as well. So you do quite often see other than the US, a lot of stuff coming out of Germany and it has done for
Mm-hmm.
quite a long time. So this is a rye whiskey. This is from Wreck and Ghost. So they're in Cornwall, but this is a rye whiskey that they purchased the spirit in from Germany, and then they finished it themselves. So this is
Okay.
finished in bourbon barrel. This is a 50.5, and you can see. I don't know if you can quite see, but you know it's going to be packed full of flavour because you've got that slight. It's a little bit cold because
Yeah,
it's been
yeah.
outside, but you got a slight haze there,
Mm-hmm.
promising.
Yeah.
So let me just clean my palate. So I think at some point there might have been some before. At some point there was some sherry cask involved as well because I'm starting to get. I get some slightly fruity kind of those sort of notes that you'd expect from a
Yeah.
sherry cask. Um, I probably need to heat it up a little bit because the sample's a little bit cold. Oh, these
Yeah.
first world problems.
I know.
Chili
I know.
samples in the winter.
Yeah. My office is fairly cold, so everything's a nice like 50 degrees,
At least you won't
probably.
lose too much from evaporation.
No. Well, not during the winter. During the
No,
summer, who knows?
it's toasty. There we go. That's better. Yeah, so this, in comparison to the Rittenhouse, and they're about the same ABV actually,
Mm-hmm.
50.5. Although this is older, this is
8 years,
eight
I think.
years.
Yeah.
8 years. This is a lot more powerful and much spicier. So there is pepper, but there's also some cinnamon and cassia, a little bit of clove. Um, but there is more of this chewiness to it. So actually, despite it being an 8-year-old whiskey, a lot of the um, base notes of the rye are coming through. Very obviously a rye. It's got that. There is it's that slightly bready, that like dark rye bready, slightly gluey. I mean, in the nicest possible way.
Right.
Note on the nose, um, that is common of these higher rye bills.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I think something like that still could work with red vermouths and probably could work in an old fashioned, but you just need to temper it a bit. So I've got my vermouth here, so I might try this with. I might be so like I think like this in something like a Boulevardier could be quite nice,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
but maybe just a sort of more straightforward 50-50 mix um, of vermouth and the whiskey, or maybe even a reverse Manhattan might work. Um,
Yeah.
uh, but let's try that. Let's give it a little on the fly kind of taste, and immediately the sort of fragrant, fruity, herbal notes of the vermouth are coming through, but they're complementing some of that spiciness and that pepperiness that we were getting from the rye, and that fruitiness. And that's that's a very nice. I think needs like a maybe a splash of orange bitters or something like that,
Uh-huh.
and maybe more ice so that it kind of you get because it's still quite a strong drink, so you get a little bit more dilution as you sip. But then I
Right.
think you'd actually be somewhere. It would be very nice actually. So yeah, another somewhere else doing rye whiskey. You know, obviously the last bit, the finishing, the last bit of aging was done in the UK. The rest was done in Germany. But it's kind of an interesting um, approach to take. And of course, if you wanted to have a rye whiskey as a distillery, as we previously mentioned, it is a messy business. So
Yeah.
if you like those flavors and you wanted to have that in your portfolio, buying in a 3 or 4 year old rye whiskey from somewhere else and then adding your value with your own finishing or whatever is quite a smart way of doing it actually.
Yeah.
So that's, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's a single barrel as well. So it's all very sort of focused, but fun. I think there's still a bit still knocking around, but not much because it's only one barrel. So,
Right. Yeah. You get 100, 200 bottles, something like that.
yeah,
That's nice. Yeah, it strikes me that might you add in my mind, I think add a splash of like soda water, maybe like a little orange, then you got yourself sort of a spritz. Yeah, there you go. And it
yeah,
just
dear.
kind of feels like some of those flavors would really complement themselves as you lengthen it.
Yeah, it's quite. I mean, even that drink that I had there, it's quite a heavy and intense whiskey, and that drink is quite heavy and intense. I mean, it'd be great for a pre or post dinner, really. I mean, there's always that question. Like, you talk about aperitifs and digestives, and
Right.
they're often very similar. We got
Yeah.
this herbal thing. We got to sell it. Have it
Right.
before dinner. Have it after dinner.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's really it. It's whenever.
But you're right.
Though,
Yeah, having that brightened up, it gives it the fruitiness is still there. But actually, if you scaled that up, and I just put normal sparkling water in there,
right.
that would be quite a pleasant dry alternative to a Pimm's.
Oh, yeah,
Maybe a
yeah.
couple of slices of lemon and orange in there, and that'd be a nice because you're getting a whole range of dry, fruity flavors. You still even at this level, you can still taste the rye and
Hmm.
appreciate the rye whiskey. So that's quite a fun way. If if you want to drink it in the summer, having it neat is not really an option. It's too strong.
Right.
But for something that's robust like this, that works. I'm not sure that it would work with the Rittenhouse. I'm not sure I
Right.
love the Rittenhouse. I think with the Ritten, we can try it. I think with the Rittenhouse, it might be slightly lost. I used quite a powerful vermouth. I used the Cocky Vermouth de Torino. I don't know if you ever tried that one.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've had that. It's nice.
It's a good one. Yeah, in my small bottled out in my little 250 to keep it fresh.
That's the way. That's the
It's
trick.
the
That's what
only
I've
way. It's the
done.
only way. I've tried them all. Tried all the methods.
Yeah. That's what I do. Whenever I get a fresh bottle of vermouth that I'm
Well,
ready to
you need to
use,
get some fresh bottles of vermouth from the sounds
I
in your
do.
house.
Yeah. I'm going to.
What if I came round and wanted a martini? Oh, is Bianco okay? No.
Well, I have some bottles of vermouth I just haven't opened yet, but
Oh,
anyway, when I'm ready, I immediately decant them into 250 ml bottles.
yeah.
So and they
Okay,
stay
here we go.
fresh.
Totally dominated by the vermouth.
Yeah, yeah, that would have been my guess. I think that intensity that you get from, say, like a malted rye or that German one, or even this other New York rye that I have, I think you need that intensity to really carry through once you
Yeah.
lengthen it. In
Because
a
this tastes like a vermouth and soda. Very
Yeah,
nice. But
right,
the extra booze that's in there is really doing nothing more than making it boozier and adding a load of
right,
calories. That's all it's doing.
yeah, yeah,
So there we go. Stick to this one.
yeah. All right, I want to show you this new whiskey I got, which I'm
Hmm.
kind of excited about. It's called
Yep.
Jaywalk
Oh yeah.
Rye. I just got it recently. So New York Distilling Company used to have a brand called Ragtime Rye,
Hello to Alan.
and hello, Alan.
I'm sure he's
Um,
listening.
maybe. And they recently replaced it with Jaywalk, and it's got a different mash bill than the Ragtime. So I don't remember what the proportions of the Ragtime were. This one, Jaywalk, is 75% New York grown rye, but it has two varieties basically of heirloom rye in it, and then a bit of corn and a little bit of malted barley. So I am super impressed by this. So this is a 7-year-old bottled in bond. and it's less than $60, something like. It's a great deal. It's an incredible deal. Um, it's just packed full of flavor.
Yeah, it looks like it is. It's interesting because the bottle that you've got there, it looks quite. Does that look? Is that hexagonal?
Yeah, yeah. So the bottom of the bottle is a stop sign.
Ah, cool. Because some of the ones I'm looking at for Jaywalk, looking for our UK European
Hmm.
listeners, they seem to be the bottle seems a lot more like the old
The right
ragtime
time.
rye one, that like
So there's
that
a
long tool bottle.
there's a cast strength version that I think is still using the ragtime, but it's also
Ah,
possible that in Europe
we're just
they're
behind.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I mean that's the thing, right? You have to have a 700 mil version. Yeah, direct from their website, it's $55. I think
that's
that's a great
fantastic.
7-year-old bottled and bond heirloom variety rye whiskey for $55. I think that's a
And
great
I've got a
price.
friend that's coming over next week from New York. Ah!
There you go. Yeah, it's good to
So
have
there we go.
friends.
There we go. There we go. Tell us what you think. Tell us about the taste. Sorry.
No, so to me I love it. It's got a really intense rye character, and because it's that heavy dominance. So if you like, say, Bullet, it's in that vein in terms of intensity, partly because of the age as well. But it's got this really unique character to the rye grain. It's just, I don't know. It's hard for me to put my finger on it exactly right now. Partly because it's a bit cold, but I just really enjoy it, and
Mm.
I've used it a couple of times in cocktails. Really nice. One of my favorite, just as an aside, one of my favorite cocktails to make with Empire Rise is the oh, what the heck is it? Now I'm blanking on the name. The New York Sour. That's it.
Ah,
The New
with the
York
little bit of
Sour.
red wine
Yeah,
on the
yeah,
top.
yeah. Yeah, the New York Sour with an Empire Rye whiskey is a really fantastic drink.
I mean, I've
It
a strict rule for whiskey sours. I'm only allowed one because if I have more than one, my wife's giving me a look. Sarah's giving me a look.
things go off the rails.
They do to go off the rails. It's just the one.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I don't, that's interesting. I know some people talk about different cocktails like that. I don't know that I've ever had one where I've just
I think it's the mood I have to be in to have a
it,
whiskey sour.
uh-huh.
It's the starting point,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and then they're just again, it's the same thing. You have to make it sweet enough. But
Right.
then if it's sweet enough, go somewhere where they're doing 2 for 1 on a whiskey
Oh,
sour, forget about it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. There's a dive bar in San Francisco. So when Tia and I lived there, it was right around the corner from us. And one year while we were living there, the Giants, the baseball team, made it to the World Series. So I got to the bar early and saved us seats at the bar, and I drank sours all night and they ended up winning the game we watched because you have to play multiple games. I don't remember if that was the last game of the series or not. I don't remember that
Big
detail,
fan,
but
obviously.
well, I grew up an A's fan, so but I was still excited to
Fair
watch it.
weather
It
fan there.
it was a great experience to have drinking whiskey. This was obviously pre kids in the bar during a World Series game that your home team wins. So that was a lot of fun.
Of
But yeah,
course.
the New York Sour with the red wine float, very nice. Though it is a bit tricky. You need to use the right kind of wine.
You
Uh,
do, and there's a book called Disco Cocktails by David T. Smith that has
oh,
some good advice.
you have good tips. What? Tell me, because
Yeah, let me have a look. Let me
is it better to be sweeter? Is it better to be drier? I feel like drier wines probably is not the right way to go. That's my gut feeling. But
have a look. Because I did try it with I know when we did the. I mean, the thing is, once you write it down, it goes out of your head, right? Um,
You don't
but
need to hold on to it anymore.
well, exactly. I'm like, well, I'll just refer to my own book.
Yeah, it's what I do. That's
Yeah, New York
because I
books.
used the New York Sour in my last book. That's why I couldn't remember the name.
Yeah. I I was being a little bit fancy. I quite liked a Malbec when I did mine. So I
Okay,
mean, I think it
yeah,
depends on for something like a New York Sour. It kind of depends on um, the scenario in which you're drinking it. So if you
yeah.
were drinking it at home, for example, my
Hmm.
suggestion would be: let's say you're having a nice meal and you had some red wine for the meal. If you've opened, which you should have done, you should have opened the red wine beforehand,
Right, let it breathe.
because you're only using 10,
Yeah,
15 mil, very small amount,
yeah,
a teaspoon or two. Um, yeah, less than 10, 15, small amount. Open that wine first and then use a little bit of that wine. It's not worth it. I mean, the wine is added to uh, improve the flavor of the drink.
yeah.
To add something to it. So there's no point in adding cheapo wine to it. You want to have something that's got. I mean, you can sometimes buy small bottles of Malbec, and that's not a bad shout if you wanted to make it and you didn't want to have a whole big bottle and then you can have a little glass of it afterwards or something like that. But I mean, with floating, it's going to be a combination of things. It's going to be the sweetness because the drink needs to be sweet enough so that
Right.
it's essentially viscous enough, thick enough for the wine to float on the top. Um, Also, having quite a lot of ice in there, I find helps.
Hmm.
And
Yeah,
then and just sort of pour it, do it over the back of the spoon or whatever, or just pour it very slowly, and
yeah.
then and that come out. If you've got one of those wine pourers, like a bit like a speed pourer, but kind of so that you can anything you can do to slow the flow down
Right.
is helpful. But I like something that's quite a thick, sort of heavy wine for that.
Yeah.
I think it works
So
quite.
probably not a Pinot Noir or
No.
Beaujolais. Yeah,
No,
yeah,
something a little bit heavier would be my. But a lot. I mean, I think it's going to be. I mean, you had too many of those. It's a bad decision in the glass. It's a young
right.
man's drink.
Yeah.
I don't think
Yeah,
I
the
want a session on New York sours now.
no, probably not. No, probably not. The first time I made it at home was I think during COVID, and Tia loves the egg white foam on
Yeah,
sours, so I made it with that. It was so bracingly dry, the whole drink. It was like I don't remember what wine I used, but it was actually really enjoyable. It was just like it had this very. It's kind of like how certain like very hoppy beers they get to this point where it's like I got to have more of that.
yeah,
That just it kind of draws you back in, makes you salivate. I think that was part of it. It just kind
yeah.
of like makes you salivate, and you're like, I need another drink. So, it was really good. I surprised myself. Haven't really been able to recreate it.
It's one of these drinks where you make this drink. You go, oh, it was really good. What I did, or I mean,
Yeah,
I think also the egg white is actually a really essential part of it as well, because you're getting that stiffness in the drink and that texture in the drink, which again is going to help
yeah.
with the floating. Um, so that speaking of drinks and things like that, you're talking about the ragtime rye, and I wonder whether or not they'll continue with Mr. Katz's rock and rye,
I believe
because I
so.
think
It looks like
that
from
was
their
part of
website, it's
the
still there. Yeah,
range. Yeah, yeah. Which is, I don't know, in some ways like a pre-mixed old fashioned, basically, isn't it?
right. Yeah. For some reason, I don't know if it was pre 20th century or like post prohibition, but there was this fad of mixing spirits and rock candy. And I don't really know why, other than people love booze and sugar together.
Yeah. Can you still get Jack Quinn's rock and rye? Is that
Jacquins?
Yeah, it's they're a very old liqueur brand, and there's a number of different things that they did over the years.
Oh,
But
I don't
one of the
know.
things, and it was over here. It was like my very early days of getting into booze, and it was a product called Jacquin's Rock and Rye,
Okay.
and it had the fruit in the bottle,
Oh,
like a couple of cherries and a
yeah, yeah.
slice of
It
orange.
is like a it is like a pre-mix old fashioned.
Yeah, it's all in there. It's in
Yeah,
the bottle.
I don't know that I've seen that. There's a slow and low rock and rye. There's a
Yep,
couple others that
yep.
have pretty good distribution. So
Yeah, it might maybe it has been
phased
maybe it
out.
has been discontinued, but it was around up until relatively recently. So there'll probably be some stores knocking around the place where there'll still be some. Because like, who's going to go and? It's not like there's this old bottle of Pappy. Oh
Rock and
well,
rye.
everyone will buy that up. Oh, this is
Right.
a bottle of Jack with Rock and Rye.
It's a dusty bottle sitting on some shelf just waiting
Oh
for you to
yeah,
find it.
probably not too far from you.
Maybe, maybe.
You go to some small town in Florida, you'll be there. Oh,
Yeah.
there it is. Well, wherever you might be. So there we go. Well, and with
I
a
think
wry
that's a good place
smile,
to end our rye conversation. So, um, yeah. So, what are you going to drink tonight? Are you going to have some rye, or are you going to have something else?
I shall have. I shall finish my old fashioned. I
Excellent.
might go for a full blown Manhattan with the maraschino.
Yep.
I haven't got any Benedictine here, so I can't try the other drinks. So I'll wait for that for another time. And then I might just have. Mm, might just have it sort of with some. Might rinse my little jug out here,
Mm-hmm.
ice, and get some still water, very very chilled.
Mm.
And then I might chill a glass in the freezer, put my rye whiskey in there, and just have what might seem very boring, some rye and water, but
Yeah,
actually will be delicious. And there's a little effort and ceremony that's gone into making it so tasty.
that sounds great. That sounds great. Yeah, I think I'm going to try Sazerac tonight. I think
Sazerac.
that's the mood.
Yeah,
So
absinthe. Yeah, there we go. Here's the absinthe. And then pours the absinthe out into a little glass on the side, so you
yeah,
can have that as his little sidecar, his little booster.
yeah, that's right. You know
What
me,
what bitters would you? What have you got? Peychaud's.
Peychaud's. Yeah, yeah.
Should try the bitter truth ones. They're Creole bitters.
Oh,
That's what I have.
I don't have that. I have their aromatic and I have their chocolate cocoa, whatever they call
Very nice.
it. I played around with the cocoa bitters last night a bit. It was it. I needed to add more. Didn't come through
Well, let's
enough.
see. Let's see how we go on the Sazerac, and then when we meet next time, let's talk about the Sazerac.
All right, sounds great.
Absinthe, cognac, herbsanthe. Ooh.
Ooh, ooh la la. All
Thank you very
right,
much.
David.
See you
Talk to
again.
you later. Bye.